Hey everyone, welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm joined by my good friend Missy Rohs. Missy is the co-owner and lead instructor and co-instructor at the Arctos School of Herbal and Botanical Studies here in Portland, Oregon. I actually took this apprenticeship, or one of their apprenticeships, I don't even remember, maybe 2018,
That
17,
sounds about right.
something like that. So highly recommended. If you're anywhere in the Northwest, check it out at arctosschool.org, but we'll get to all that later. Anyways, welcome to the show, Missy.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
I don't think I've ever asked this before. Perhaps I have, but I've always been curious where you got the name Arctos. And I presume Arctos is in reference to a bear.
It is. Yeah, Arctis is Greek for bear. And back when Grady and I first decided to start collaborating, because Grady Proctor is the other half of the school, we were trying to come up with a name. And we went through a lot of like our favorite plant names and whatever, and it was really hard to come up with something that didn't sound too trite, or like probably a lot of other herb schools were using it already or something. And this was back in the 2000s, so not every herb school was online yet. So it was also a little challenging to know exactly how many different Artemisia schools or whatever there were. So we brainstormed some names and got some names from a witchy friend of ours, and one of the names we really loved was Great Bear. And we were just like, that sounds really nice. Great Bear School of Herbal and Botanical Studies. And we tried it out on a friend, and right away she was like, are you trying to sound Native American? And I was like, no, we are not trying to sound that way. And so I was angling for switching it to Latin. So Ursa Major. And Grady felt like that was a little too much like it sounded like we were teaching astronomy instead. So I was like, okay, Greek, because still a lot of our words come from Greek, right? And certainly a lot of the plant names incorporate Arctos, like Arctium and Arctostaphylos and stuff. So that was how we got it. Bears are really good herbalists. They use plants medicinally all the time. So yeah, that's where we got our inspiration.
Very natural. I like the connection between bears being good herbalists. And I thought Arctos was Latin, but it's Greek.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, did you know that we named our cat Corvus?
Oh,
after,
yes.
Which I presume now is the Latin for crow or raven. But yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and then in your logo, I love your logo, there's other plants intertwined in it as well. I'm guessing you and Grady had kind of a fun time creating that together, or?
You know what's amazing is that one of the students in our very first year came up with that logo for us, like a draft of it. And she put in the bear skeleton and whatever and had some plants. And it was a little bit of a rougher sketch. And then a number of years later, I was working with one of our alumni, and we were straining tinctures together, and I was like, I don't know where to go to get someone to redo the logo, clean it up a bit, make it look a little bit more just like crisp. And she was like, oh, I'm a great artist. I could do that. And she probably didn't say she was a great artist, but she is. Her name's Natalie Valentine. And she totally reworked it and decided what botanicals to put in there. And I love like that there's violets and roses and all kinds of good stuff in there.
It really is one of my favorite logos. And I was actually, in a previous podcast episode, I was complimenting Michael Moore's logo as well, which maybe I'll ask you later on if you have any idea what that is. But it's a dream of mine one day to offer T-shirts through Herb Rally with a bunch of different cool school logos on it. I always thought that'd be really fun. But yeah, I've got so many questions. But I'm going to ask you more about how you got into herbalism later. But I'm curious how you met Grady.
Yeah, that's a good story. I had actually known his former spouse through activism a long time ago, through activism before and after the World Trade Organization protests in Seattle. And so she and I were acquaintances or like friendly. And I knew that she was great. And I had some mutual friends with Grady who kept on being like, you don't know Grady Proctor? Like, I think you guys would get along. And then I got involved in this organization called BARK here in Portland that works to protect the Mount Hood National Forest. And Grady was involved in BARK too, and we both ended up going to a small volunteer camp out. And that was when we first really met. And I was like, interesting. This person knows a lot about plants, but it's different stuff about plants than I know. I wonder if we would be a good teaching pair. So that was how we first got into it.
Now, he's a Columbine School of Botanical Studies alumni, and I know you're Michael Moore. When you studied with Michael Moore, was Howie Brownstein teaching there?
Yes,
Okay.
Howie came and taught physiology at the very beginning of the class, which was really cool because I had met him through my studies with Colette Gardner. He would come and do some guest instructing for her, and then there was another year when I was sort of her teacher's aide and got to sort of be his I unlocked the space for him kind of assistant. And so when he came down to Michael's to teach that year, he already knew who I was. So that was very exciting to be like, ooh, look, the teacher knows who I am.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think Howie actually kind of liked actually knowing somebody in the class too. So
Yeah, worked both ways, sure. So kind of going back in the past, what were you like as a child?
Whoa, what was I like as a child?
Yeah,
That's a good one.
I know you later on became kind of an activist type. Like, do you kind of like connecting the dots backwards? Do you kind of always have seen that in you, or?
There were absolutely threads.
Yeah.
So a slightly embarrassing story about me is that in first grade, I remember, you would have recess and people especially back in the late 70s, early 80s, it was very sex segregated. I don't know if playgrounds are quite that same way these days, but a lot of the girls would play house and I never really got it. I was just like, why are we playing house? I don't really understand why we would do this. But I started to instigate that we would play Mother Nature and Baby Natures. And so I demanded that I was Mother Nature and that everybody else be my Baby Natures.
Gosh.
And we would go out and I don't know, find pine cones or whatever. So that both shows that I was very attracted to the outdoors and was also bossy.
It's all starting to come together for me.
Yeah. But I also was pretty excited about just justice in general too as a kid. And, I remember having actually disagreements with my parents about what was fair and what was just society-wide and stuff. It's well, there shouldn't be rich people when some people can't eat. And they were like, that's not really how we see it. It's well, that's how I see it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, it does. It's starting to make sense. So then, kind of going from there, when did you start realizing I'm going to teach herbalism? What were the steps in between that?
Yeah, so I had studied with Colette Gardner and with Krista Olson and then with Michael Moore. And at that point, Colette had described Michael Moore's school as finishing school for herbalists, so that when you came out of that, people would feel comfortable being I am an herbalist now. Which I think, for me, it did give me the confidence to be oh yeah, I can claim this title. I can feel good about doing health consultations. I've really seen a lot of different perspectives on how herbs work. And I had always really enjoyed teaching and facilitating stuff since college, or honestly even kind of high school. I had done some facilitating and teaching things like your rights in the police seminars and other kinds of little short workshops and stuff. And I started to percolate on what that would look like with herbalism once I realized that Colette was no longer teaching at that point. Krista had moved away out of state. And of course, Michael was very far away. And at that point, our other like very big name local person, Cascade Anderson Geller, had also taken a break from teaching. And I approached Colette, especially after I met Grady, and I was like, so do you think I'm ready to teach? Do you think that this is a good idea? And she was like, yes, do this. So it was really great to get her blessing doing that.
What was that first year teaching like? Was it like intimidating? I mean, how
absolutely. Yeah. And I also I almost feel like apologizing to those students. Like, I didn't freaking know what I was doing. Luckily, I'm actually still really good friends with one of them. Okay. And apparently she still sees me as, like a mentor and a teacher as well as a friend, because she recently gifted me 3 Devil's Club beads that she had hand carved for as a gift for me. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so sweet and such a treasure. So precious, but it also made me feel a little bit better about me as a teacher, that she doesn't think I'm a total buffoon. Because that first year, we definitely the first couple of years, you're always just exploring, stumbling through, trying to get your rhythm. I tried to cover the whole entire GI system on the first day. Yeah.
I noticed that too with Herb Rally and just projects in general. Sometimes you just kind of have to take the leap. You have to start. It's not going to be perfect. And I could see how daunting and intimidating starting a herb school would be. You feel like you have to have everything figured out, but you don't. You just have to start.
Co-teaching with somebody, co-teaching with Grady, those first handful of years that we taught together, we were both at each other's classes. He still took the lead on field trips. I still took the lead on classroom days, but we were both there the whole time. And so that did a number of things. A, I got to learn from Grady Proctor for years, which is amazing. B, whenever I was I could say, Grady, could you please take over? Or even when just my voice physically would give out sometimes. But then also it allows us to give each other little hints or feedback or whatever too. And so I love that kind of a project where you can do it with somebody and collaborate, and you are kind of doing it yourself, but you're also getting hey, maybe focus on this a little bit more, or lean into that a little bit, or wow, that was a lot to cover in one day, dude, or whatever.
Right. Yeah, having a partner is super helpful, I would imagine. And that was my experience at Columbine's. Steven had a specialty, Howie had a specialty, but then when I took the Arctos school, I would look forward to a Missy day versus a Grady day for totally different reasons, and it was super fun to go out in the field with both of you, and you both have your own things that you chime in on, and then we'd come over here and you'd teach us medicine in the kitchen and stuff like that. And I totally agree. It's nice to have someone to balance the feedback with and all that. So, do you have any fun Michael Moore stories that come to mind?
Oh man, I should just get my notebooks and start rattling off some of the things I wrote down that he would say. He was such a caring man under all of the gruffness. And that was really just so sweet. And he always had the most off the wall analogies where he would go down these roads, or just go very descriptive into very specific kind of examples. And so I always tell people I came out of that program with so much more knowledge about rancid fats than I would ever have thought I would have. He would go into great descriptions about places that make donuts that change their oils only once a week, and how customers complain the next day whenever they do. And so that was pretty entertaining, although not everybody was very into it. There were definitely some students who were no, these rambles have to stop. He needs to get back on track now.
How long were his classes?
I think they ran from 2 to 7.
Okay.
And we took a little dinner break. And they might not have always started on time or ended at 7. It's been a while.
Yeah, sure.
And I do want to like just take a second and say that when we say Michael Moore, it's a little bit like in the music world when you say, oh yeah, I love Gillian Welch, because it's actually always Gillian Welch and David Rawlings. And whenever we say, oh, I love Michael Moore's classes, like you're always saying Donna Chestnut is like the unspoken part of that phrase.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
That's very true. Yeah, absolutely.
And Donna's obviously still around.
Yep.
She is still great. And while she didn't, often stand in front of the class and lecture for us, like she was always tending the edges and always like making sure that Michael could be like ready to teach and prepared and like getting us to where we were going. And I always loved the wisdom that she shared too.
Yeah, so she would actually teach some of the classes, or just the wisdom on the periphery?
A little more wisdom on the periphery. Like she was always present, and would often be there on like field days to like do a little bit of the instructing too. But it was more in the sort of like interstitial moments where she would jump in and be like, oh yeah, like here's how you want to do this with your percolation or whatever, or let's talk a little bit about the land here and how you can't just go out and like discover a stand of anemone and go harvest it, and here's why.
I've had communication with Donna over the years through working at the Mountain Reserve's Herbal Education program, and she's always been a pleasure to work with. And I'm going to take this as an opportunity to shout out Amanda, because
she's the silent part of the Herb Rally team.
She makes everything beautiful, and she's recording it right now. And it's I think it's important to like give people their props. So thanks for saying that. Absolutely. Plus, I want the brownie points, and well, thank you for sharing about Michael. I've always just kind of been fascinated by that school in general, and I know a lot of like my homies from the herbal community came from that tradition. So I'm trying to remember, but you had a good story about going to some strip mall and buying chamomile tea. Does this ring a bell? Shoot, let me.
Oh, it was actually when I was working in the strip mall.
Oh, okay, and I was just wondering. I remember you telling me that story and think it was fascinating. So I thought maybe for the Herb Rally audience, you could.
Oh, absolutely.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, it was just a really good story about just like how even like very modest interventions can make a big difference. And I was working for a chiropractor, about 12, 15 years ago, probably. And she was in this totally barren strip mall. Like it, like usually at a strip mall, you can see some like plantain or whatever. There was none of that. What you could see was like some shrubs and then the highway, out the front window. So I was working and I was doing a bunch of what I did at the job, which was like answering phones, making appointments, doing the billing, calling insurance, following up on stuff. And almost all of it involved a keyboard, right? And partway through the day, I realized that my finger hurt super bad and I had a hangnail, and that it was paining me every time I typed. And I was like, this is really stupid, but I think I might have to go home sick because of a hangnail because I can't do anything. And I tried like, oh, is there anything out in the parking lot that I could use to make this better? And like, no, there was not. So in the break room, like in the sort of lunch area, I had a bunch of tea and I was like, well, there's this really old chamomile tea. And I actually think that it was so old that I had bought it while I was at Michael Moore's school. Because I remember thinking like, damn, this is really old. Yeah. Why do I even have chamomile tea at work? I need to stay awake at work. Yeah. And so I brewed up that chamomile tea and I soaked my hot finger in it and did a little hydrotherapy where I dunked it in some icy water and then put it back in the hot for 3 to 4 minutes, back in the cold for to a full minute, back and forth a few times. And then I was like, well, we'll see if that works. That was like some really old chamomile and it's not very potent, I'm sure. And whether it was the very old chamomile or whether it was the hydrotherapy on its own, like half an hour later, I was just like, I don't have any problem at all with my finger. And I just love little tiny vignettes like that where like herbs will just improve the day, and natural healing, like just home remedies, will be like, bam, this is better. And it's not the kind of thing you would go to the doctor for if you didn't have herbs, but herbs can make it a lot better.
It's amazing. I'm sure you still get surprised by how well herbs work, you know?
Yeah.
I used to want knuckle rocker tattoos that say herbs work.
Yes. Oh, that's a good one.
It wouldn't quite fit. I'd make
Yeah.
it fit somehow. But you know what's funny is I don't even know if that's the story or the vignette you were referring to, because I want to say it had to do with a wedding and a tummy ache and a chamomile and a strip mall still.
Yeah, it was another strip mall.
And a chamomile, right?
It was ginger.
Oh, ginger. Okay. You want to tell us that one?
Sure. That's another one of my favorites because it involves my younger sister who we're kind of different temperaments when it comes to like food and tastes. And she has literally told me before that she doesn't understand why black pepper is on tables because it's too spicy. Why would people do that? And that's not how I feel. Yeah. And if she sees a mushroom growing in a yard, she'll stomp on it. Like we are just very different that way. But she was getting married, and it was 2007, so it was a while back, and I was in Connecticut for her wedding, and she woke up that day and she was legitimately sick. Like, okay, we're gonna quick take you to the doctor to see if you need antibiotics, kind of sick. And that sucked for her. But around noon or so, we were at the strip mall, and she was like getting her hair done, and then she got brought into the makeup room, and she was looking kind of green. And I was just like, Marty, you look not awesome. I'm going to find you something to help your nausea. It's not going to taste great. You're not going to like how it tastes, but it will help. And she was like, okay. And so while she was getting her makeup done, I went to the grocery store next door, and being suburban Connecticut, like they had this huge aisle for tea and none of it was ginger. And I was like, damn it. And then there was a Japanese restaurant next door to that. And so I ran in there and I was like, do you have some pickled ginger? I know this sounds really weird, but can I take some to go? I really appreciate it. Bye.
Did you pay for it?
I didn't. I know. Every time I tell this, I'm like, I should have tipped. But I had a little bit of the wedding panics, right?
Sure, yeah. You're excused.
I took this little tiny to-go of pickled ginger over to my sister, and she was like, ugh, this tastes terrible. But she kept on asking for it every couple of hours after that because it worked so well. She was like, can I have another bite of that horrible stuff? I'm like, it's gourmet. It's pickled ginger, but okay.
It's delicious.
So yeah, that actually really kept her going throughout like the whole festivities.
Wow.
It helped so much. And I knew it must be really working if she was willing to tolerate that taste.
Wow. Yeah, that's herbs work. Yeah. Sticking with the plants here, can you tell us about some of the reasons why you're infatuated with Hawthorne?
Oh man, it's true. Do I show off?
Yeah,
the tattoo?
show it off. Yeah. Exactly.
All right, I've got some like Hawthorne. Oh, I'm just messing with the little microphone now.
You know it's a plant ally when you tattoo it on yourself.
It's true. Yeah. It's my only professional tattoo. Hawthorne, I like to say, is just like an herbal hug. And for me, I feel like that's something that we really all need. It's really called for just because we're humans and we go through life and things happen and we have losses and we have hard days, but also because we're living in this moment where we are causing the earth massive damage and we're seeing the repercussions of it all the time, whether it's like, wow, I didn't realize that there was a full-on tornado season every year where, destruction would happen across the country, or whether it's, just wow, there's a winter outside still and it's April in Portland and I am not used to it never being 70. So yeah, there's just all sorts of stuff that we're dealing with and constant reminders. And then of course there's the political times. Fascism has been revitalized and we are constantly dealing with that too. So anyways, those are some of the many reasons that I love Hawthorne, and I kind of have yet to find someone who it really doesn't fit,
Yeah.
I think that it's a very, something's going wrong, why not just use some Hawthorne? Like, it won't have a bad impact.
Yeah, very safe. Do you consume it tonically?
I should.
Whenever you need a hug.
Yeah, I do consume it fairly regularly, and it is up next to my vitamins. It's the only thing I have encapsulated right now that I'll sometimes just be like, yeah, it's a Hawthorne day. Let's just pop a couple of those, as well as have some tincture nearby.
Yeah. And do you like the leaf, flower, berry, all the above, or?
Yeah, all the above. Yeah. I focus a lot on the berries and the flowers, and then if some leaves come along with the flowers, then great. Yeah. And the berries, of course, have that propensity to sometimes glue up, get all pectinized when you make tinctures or syrups with them. So lately I've been focusing on the flowers because I feel like I had kind of a bad luck streak there for a little while.
Sure, yeah. With the pectin.
Yeah, with the pectin and the berries. But yeah, they're both really great medicine.
Are you still seeing clients as a practicing clinical herbalist?
I am. Yeah. I don't have a 9 to 5 every single week thriving kind of that sort of clinical practice. But folks do come over, or else I'll just talk to them on the phone too. And usually it takes about an hour and a half, and it's kind of anything from digestive stuff to heartache to menopausal issues to one of the digestive things that happened over this last year that I thought was fascinating was someone who, after surgery that didn't have anything to do with their core, had lost their appetite on recovery, and talking about how to regain that. So yeah, a lot of different kinds of things. I love doing that.
Do you have any advice for someone who's just getting going with, say, a clinical practice?
Don't count on it for income.
I've heard that from other herbalists now. That's come up a few times, so yeah.
Yeah, that's my first piece of advice. I mean, even people who are interviewing to come join our program who say that they want to make a living as an herbalist, I'm like, yeah, keep that on the back burner. It may eventually become something that you can cultivate and do that way. But I've seen a lot of people, especially in the Portland area, try to become full-time clinical herbalists and just not have that fly. And I think in Portland, there's a lot of reasons. Our naturopaths are licensed here, so people can use insurance for naturopaths. They don't necessarily know that there are differences between naturopaths and herbalists, or maybe they were lucky enough to find a naturopath who is an herbalist. We also have herb schools here, and a lot of folks are like, oh, I have a friend who's, going to herb school. I'll just ask them instead. And that's a little different than somebody who has a decade or two of experience.
A little bit.
But I see that, I see where that's coming from. But the people I feel who do make a real go of it tend to live in states without naturopaths who are licensed, and maybe even in underserved areas health-wise, where people might be coming to them sort of as a last resort, but they do make some profound improvements in those people's lives, and I think that that's great.
So just have herbal business in the beginning.
Yeah, or combine it with other things. Yeah. I know someone in town who's an awesome midwife and herbalist, or, I know people who work it into their massage practice or other sorts of healing modalities. So I think it can be a great companion for some other things that might be a little bit more on the map for people when they know that they want to look for some kind of healing. I don't think massage therapy is like, a brand new concept to a lot of adults in the Portland area, at least. So, people might go out looking for that and then be like, oh, and this person can help me with herbs too. That's amazing.
Yeah. Do you find a lot of your students that come see you and study with you, are they looking to become clinical herbalists? Or is it just, this is something I'm interested in, that kind of thing?
I definitely get some of those folks. And then some folks who are like, I just am dabbling. I don't know what's going on. Or some folks who are interested in seeking a deeper nature connection. Up until this past year, where we had a very sad tragedy in our local herbal community, there was another school in town that was promoting itself much more as a clinical program, which I don't put Arctis out there as a clinical program because I don't think 250 hours makes a clinical herbalist. So I promote it more as a community herbalism program and a great like first or second or third step towards becoming a clinical herbalist. And so I think for a while, at least, a lot of folks who are looking for clinical education were going there. And, I think the people that come out of our program, though, are amazed at how much they know, like both with regards to how to know what plant you're looking at, how to know what herbs you're using are high quality, how to make your medicine, where to look for plants if you're harvesting them, how to, differentiate between whether you want to use this sleep herb or that sleep herb with someone. So I think that people are always surprised. I'm just never always adept at letting them know how much they're going to know.
Totally. Well, I guess that's a nice segue into actually talking about what it is Arctos does and specializes. I know when I went, you had a couple different apprenticeships. You kind of had like the more intensive one. I went to the one where I cherish these memories where I drive up once every 3 weeks from Eugene to Portland and stay for the whole weekend. And that was super awesome. I don't know if you still do that as well, but then you do a lot of electives too. So I'm just kind of curious what it is you're offering these days, the different apprenticeships and whatnot.
Yeah. So our longest program is our Herbal Immersion program, and that meets Wednesdays and Thursdays, spring through fall, and the whole day, 10 to 4. And structure-wise, we're usually out in the field on Wednesdays, meeting plants in their habitats, getting some hands-on experience that way, learning plant ID, ecology, wildcrafting. And then usually on Thursdays, we're here at my house and having classroom day, making medicines, talking about herbs by body system, taking some urban walks, making different kinds of like tinctures, salves, that kind of stuff. Maybe having some woo days with like making a little bit of a flower essence or something.
Heck yeah.
And then we usually have a few guest instructors along the way. I tuck in some first responder skills because first aid is near and dear to my heart. We have a camp out and talk about, all kinds of things like formulating, contraindications. We play some herbal games. You probably remember some of those.
Yeah, those were fun. Yeah.
And then right now our Saturday program is on hold, but what it's been the last few years is we've created a Saturday program where you can take 4 weeks at a time, or you can take the whole thing for a whole year. So that happens every other month: February, April, June, August, and November. Sorry, October. Skipped a couple months there. And you can either string that together as a whole program or just take different sections that have different focuses. And both programs are really seasonally focused. We work with things that, are in season, the remedies that are called for that season. And it's pretty fun.
One thing I appreciate about Arctos as well is you there's like mushrooms. You include mushrooms. I want to say there was like talks of trees as well. Columbine School was a lot. We didn't really focus on trees or mushrooms, so I really appreciated that. Plus the whole kitchen component. Yeah, and I kind of want to go on a little rant. We were talking before the podcast started, like, I can't emphasize enough taking an in-person school. Well, you and I were discussing the importance of the community that you build in person with the fellow students and the teachers, but then also just if you're going out in the woods and developing relationships with the plants, like it's hard to do that online. Herb Rally is obviously an online herbal education learning platform, but that doesn't matter. You're the only way you're going to build these deep relationships with the plants is by being out in the woods with the expert herbalists who are teaching these plants week after week. You go out there, you see them through the seasons, right? Like I remember going out with columbines, and we would go to the same spots throughout the months, and you would just see the ecology change, and it was just I never had that type of experience before, and you just can't get that sitting at a computer screen.
It's really true. And I do love it when herb school cohorts form friendships and form that community so that they can keep learning together. And I think that getting that foundation of in-person learning means that you'll get a lot more out of online learning in the future. And then you have these buddies that you can study with too.
Totally.
And be like, oh, I've been learning through Herb Rally Schoolhouse, or I've been learning through, Maria Noel Grove's online program or whatever. And then you guys can compare notes and be like, oh, I had no idea. And already meeting the plants and already knowing that kind of stuff really can make that a much more rich experience learning.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, whether you do online first and then in person or vice versa. And I know all this stuff costs money, but I don't know, if you're looking to become an herbalist, I can't recommend, or going to like in-person events too, which is where a great place actually to find teachers who you jive with, and then kind of go from there. But
yeah, I love herb conferences. I'm missing them so bad. I'm so excited to go to Elise's farm.
Oh yeah, are you gonna do that?
Yeah,
are you teaching at it?
Yes, nice. To herb camp at Oshala Farm in June. So everyone be there. That's going to be the place to be. But it'll be my first in-person conference since the beginning of the pandemic.
Wow. Yeah. And then, as you know, Brighton-Bush is not happening after all this year. So I know that's...
Hopefully next year.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We're going to the Great Lakes Herb Fair in September in Michigan, and I'm just so excited because, I haven't been to an event since February of 2019. So, yeah it's been a while. And herb conferences, they're just so much fun.
Yeah.
So.
And I just want to totally echo what you said, that they are the best place to get a taste of each instructor, figure out who really calls to you, who's your speed, who gives you the kind of information that makes sense to you, because herb teachers are all so different, and it's just like field guides, get the ones that'll speak to you, and the other herb teachers are great for other people.
I remember Howie and Steven, I went on a 3-hour interview with them to make sure that A, I was a good fit for them, and B, they were a good fit for me. And then I remember doing the same thing with, I don't think Grady was at our interview. Maybe he was. But you interview students too. And so...
Not for 3 hours.
No. That's a little overkill. But yeah, if you're an herb student and I love that you offer the interview as a way to see if it's a good fit. And I'm just asking you, if you're going to go meet with an herbalist who maybe you're going to go to their school, just respect them. And I don't know. Sometimes I hear stories about people not honoring the time of the teacher, or why are we doing this? This is a waste of time. I think it's very necessary. And I don't know if I'm making sense right now, but do you know what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah.
Can you say it for me?
I think it is really great to have an interview and get a feel of what the school's going to be like and stuff. It's the interview when you come for our school is really just me giving a spiel where I lay out expectations of students and then let folks know, we will be outside almost half the time. We will be doing, XYZ kinds of things. We do want you to turn your cell phone off for the whole day. If that doesn't resonate for you, then that's cool. I can direct you to some other places. And I think that it helps the student to know like what's going on, and if they're not feeling it or whatever, they can look elsewhere. Helps me to know if they're like constantly interrupting in the interview, like it might not be the best fit.
Right.
That kind of stuff. And also sometimes people have really specific things that they're looking for. Like sometimes they are really only on a clinical track.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, well, here are some other places that you can go for that. Or they like don't really want the outdoor time, or like hands-on medicine making isn't so important to them. They'd rather like do some other stuff.
Yeah.
And that's awesome too.
Yeah.
Or they'd like to maybe get more woo, because
Yeah.
there are a couple of like flower essence days or whatever in our class, but like we really don't focus on the woo. We focus on pragmatics. Yeah. And so if they would like to do a lot more plant meditations and stuff, there's probably other great schools too.
So one of my favorite things about the herbal community is we are able to go from super woo all the way to very sciencey, and people go from everywhere in between. And I would say even though Arctos doesn't focus on the woo per se, even after taking your class or Columbine's, it ends up kind of becoming a spiritual experience in a way, because it's hard to spend that much time in the old growth forest in the Western Cascades and not have like this deep spiritual experience outside.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is like, I don't feel like I'm here to teach people that, but I'm here to like let them know that it's there.
Yeah.
And like, it seems like everybody comes out of it with like a whole new like place in their heart for the ecology, for the earth.
So if you're in the Pacific Northwest, highly recommend Arctos School. This isn't the end of the interview, but I just wanted to give props and shout outs to Missy and Grady. I took the apprenticeship, loved it. I think I'm actually due for another apprenticeship. It's been a few years, so it's time. Yeah, but
I wonder who you're going to find out in Wisconsin.
There's several. Yeah, we made a friend, Kyle Denton at Tippecanoe Herbs. He's in Milwaukee. But yeah, there's actually quite a few herbalists out there, so exciting. They're everywhere, they're everywhere. I'm finding that out. So I was going to ask you if there's any new books that you're excited about in the herbal sphere.
Well, they're not the newest, but of course I'm pretty in love with Juliet Blankespor's new book.
It's beautiful.
I just think that like the wisdom that she imparts and the content that she brings is really great. And you can just see her love of the plants shine through. And it's a really pretty book too. So I think that this is especially great for beginners, but it seems like I'm getting a lot out of it too. And there's some cool recipes.
Yeah, it's the Healing Garden, but it's not just about gardening herbs. I remember I was researching some stuff for oats, and she had a whole, like you said, recipes and stuff in there. So yeah, it's more than just a herb gardening book.
Yeah, if I can get my hands on a nice pile of nettles, I might try out her nettle. There was a tip, I don't remember. It looks so good though. And then the other one that, of course, I'm in love with, and of course, like I have to like
it's a workout.
Practice like lifting it. But Christina Dinas, her Western Botanical Medicine book is just like, it's like.
Look at that thing. Yeah. That's awesome.
And it's just such a labor of love, and it's self-published. Like I can't even imagine like putting all this work into it. And it's just got such detailed information about like, plant constituents and different uses. And it's not the most like beginner friendly book, but it is a fabulous book for like, intermediate and advanced herbalists. I think that it's a really wonderful reference.
Yeah, we actually recorded, I want to say, a whole 10-minute video with Krista where she talks all about the book. So maybe we'll like link that, like, I don't know where, somewhere up here or something.
Awesome.
But it was such a fun time to hang out with her. She's a hoot. And I always butcher this, but I want to say she told me that she spent 20 years on it. Amanda, am I over exaggerating on that? But
I mean, it seems like one would have to spend that long on it. I know that like Selena Vaughn put a lot of effort into it, and other people like supported
that's right.
her.
Selena did. That's true.
I mean, it's It's massive.
Yeah, so support your local herbalist. I want to say she self-published it. It's super expensive for a book, but yeah, if you're able to afford it, it's a great investment in your herbal education. So good choices. Do you want to do a Let's Get Deep card?
Sure.
All right, let's learn more about Missy from the non-herbal side. And this will be random, and then if we don't like it, we'll just draw a new one. What is the most adventurous thing you've done?
Oh, I always feel caught off guard by these. Like, I'm sure that in 2 days I'll be like, oh, I should have said this one thing.
We could draw another one if you want.
I mean, honestly, since we've been talking about it, definitely going off to herb school to study with Michael Moore in Arizona was pretty adventurous for me at the time.
Yeah.
And it was a really challenging time in my life, too. I was living in a house by myself in Arizona down there, and it was fully infested with earwigs.
That's gross.
Totally creeped me out. I had to set up a tent indoors to have an earwig-free space.
Really?
They were in my bed.
Wow.
They were literally in my clean underwear. Like, they were everywhere.
Yowzers.
But the whole challenge of going to a new ecosystem to study herbs is a little outlandish.
Yeah.
And of course, Michael was covering stuff from all over
Sure.
North America and occasionally even from other places.
But it's the desert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for this damp Northwesterner to go down to the desert for 6 months was quite a thing. Although I've got to say, my mood in February was way better with that much sun.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of adventurous.
Were you coming from Connecticut or Portland at the time?
Oh, Portland.
Portland, okay. So you were
Yeah.
already living in Portland at that point.
Yeah, I moved to Portland in '92, so I've been here for a good
From
30
Connecticut, though.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how does that rank on a scale of 1 to 10, moving from Connecticut to Portland? That's pretty adventurous.
I mean, I was a teenager and I was going off
Okay.
to college,
Yeah.
so it wasn't unusually adventurous.
Yeah, okay, sure.
And when you do land at a college in that kind of situation, there's so much structure available for you, and you're plopped right in the middle of a whole bunch of other people who don't know where they are and don't have any other friends either. So I remember a couple of people on my dorm floor actually were from Southern California, and there was a tree on campus that they called the Bob Ross tree because they hadn't believed before that trees changed those magical colors in the fall. And so, anyways, we were all out of our element there. And that was a great adventure. And obviously, I fell completely in love with Portland.
Yeah.
But yeah, the desert was an extreme. And I had also never quite felt at home in Connecticut too, so.
Yeah. Hence the childhood, going back to the childhood story from the playground days. Did you meet Dave here in Portland?
Yeah, we were both vending at a farmer's market. I was selling tinctures, and at that time, cute. I know, right? It's so Portlandia. At the time, he had a vegan truffle business. So the herbalist and the vegan chocolate maker got together, and there were actually some very good collaborations with Western red cedar tincture and the dark chocolate truffles. Amazing.
That sounds amazing.
Some good Damiana goji berry
wow.
truffles. So yeah, that was.
So we went from making vegan chocolate truffles to fixing accordions, which is also another very Portland profession. I
know, right? And there were a few intermediate years of working in some restaurants that were less than glamorous, very poorly compensated years. But yeah, Dave got really exhausted with making the pastry chef life work, and he was getting paid the exact same thing he was getting paid in the 80s. And he just fell in love with accordions and
so cool.
Went to study accordion repair in a couple of different places and just got right to it. And it turns out there are a lot of accordions out there.
Yeah. I buy it. Well, I guess the rules of the game mean I have to answer the question too, and
Yes.
like you, I'm feeling stumped. But I do remember, there's that phase in your like late teens, early 20s when you just do really dumb things. And I remember on a regular, actually it involves Portland, I would by myself just jump on the Greyhound bus with literally no plan, and I would, it's 2 hours north of Eugene, and I would just make do with. I would meet people and stay with them. Or one night I remember sleeping on top of some random building that I saw earlier in the day, and I think it was in Chinatown. And yeah, just being reckless and adventurous, and I kind of miss those days sometimes. But
Yeah, that's fair. I've
Yeah.
definitely done some like, okay, let's just plop down the sleeping bag right here for the night kind
Yeah.
of adventure.
yeah, let's do that sometime, Amanda.
I think my body now would be less forgiving than my body at
Totally.
age 20.
Yeah. Well, part of that trip involved me falling from like a 1.5-story building. Yeah, like
Whoa.
it was not good. So, um, that's a podcast for another day, though. But
Yeah, we could do a whole like Greyhound Adventure podcast
Totally.
though, because I've gone back and forth to Chicago a few times.
from
and
here,
Yes,
Yeah.
that is a long ass
I
ride.
bet. I mean, are we talking a week?
Oh, it's like more like 3 days.
Oh, okay, still, yeah.
But it's like
Lots of
24
stops.
hours. Yeah.
Oof, that's intense. I've done San Francisco, but yeah, a couple more questions. This I haven't not asked anyone this yet, but I'm just kind of curious because I know you. Do you have any like life? This is going to seem really grandiose.
Yeah.
Life advice or anything that you kind of want to leave the Herb Rally audience with, like what is one of the tenets of how you like to roll and that you'd like to kind of just share?
Center justice and compassion. Another thing that popped to my mind is I didn't finish with my advice to people who wanted to go into clinical herbalism, which was to have good boundaries. And like that's some life advice too, but like don't ask questions you don't want the answers to, because you don't need to know like certain details in order to give your herbal recommendations for some stuff. But also like refer out when you need to. So yeah, that's a little bit that's like both tacked onto the clinical herbalist advice, but also a little bit of life advice. Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to, and have some decent boundaries. Know when to say that's it. That's all I can handle right now, and I would love to help you find some further resources.
That sounds like a perfect woo encapsulation of the Hawthorne in a way.
Oh, I like
Yeah.
that.
All right, we're tying it back together here on the Herbalist Hour. Well, very good. I almost said cool. Very good. So I guess the last question is, we have been saying what's your favorite part about being an herbalist, but we're kind of like trying to expand that to what keeps you learning and growing. Why do you continue to do this work? What are you so passionate about it?
You know, I feel like the right answer is the plants, but really for me, the answer is the people.
That's good.
I just love having a way to learn more about people, to share knowledge with people, to just help folks on their health journeys. Like it's really fun being this is going to sound weird. It's really fun being the person that someone calls at 9 at night being like, oh, I cut the tip of my finger off. What do I do now? And come to me with your infections, folks. I love infections. But I love it. And I love just like the dynamic nature of it. Like it's never the same thing twice. It's never the same class twice, even if I'm teaching the same material. And then it's never the same season twice. Like when it comes to the plants, things are always changing. Locations are always changing. Like they're evolving, they're growing, they're being cut down, they're, all of that. And the fact that all of that work with people gets to involve plants and the outdoors and keep me so much more emotionally grounded and emotionally healthy is fabulous.
I'm noticing a theme: the plants and the people. And I don't remember if I said this off air or not, but yeah, like I love the herbalists and the herbs, So yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. And where do you want people to go to find more about what your work is?
Yeah, they can find out more at arctosschool.org. It's ARCTOS school.org. There's also an Arctos Facebook page, just the Arctos School. I have a personal Instagram that you're welcome to follow if you'd like. You'll get both some school things and some kitty cats. Dave. Some accordion stuff.
Yeah.
And
Is that at Missy Rohs?
I think it's a PDX Plant Lover.
That, yeah.
Or
at
Plant
PDX.
Lover PDX.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you type in Missy Rohs, it'll come up. My last name is spelled Rohs.
That's right.
It's weird.
You're like Lemon Balm Rose.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Right on. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, Mason.
Bye. Yeah, thank you.